Wow, he looks like he's having a bad day. Me? I'm the guy who's stabbing him. Because, well, I'm forced to play this greasy now. And I feel like I should teach everyone else the ways of the Scrub Lord. How to be a Bladedancer in a meta where the Bladedancer just got nerfed. Welcome to my ultimate guide to Bladedancer, which is a subclass of the Hunter in Destiny. The Hunter is one of 3 Guardian classes, the others being Titan and Warlock. Now what differentiates these 3 are the stats. The Hunters have a higher base agility stat and a lower armor and recovery stat than their Warlock or Titan counterparts. Now, armor determines how much health your Guardian has. With the highest possible armor, Hunters have nearly 200 health, and with the lowest possible armor, Hunters have as little as 186. Low armor makes your Hunter susceptible to death from a trip mine in a few specific instances. This usually results in fewer headshots required to kill a Hunter with some certain weapons, like let's say the Meta multi-tool. At the lowest armor, you can be 2-tapped by high impact hand cannons, like the first curse. The next stat is recovery, and this determines how quickly your health and shields regenerate after you've been damaged. The blink jump ability applies a -1 recovery stat. Agility determines how high your Guardian jumps and how fast they move around. This includes strafing speed, which is basically moving side to side in a gunfight. In a game like Destiny, with an abysmal tick rate and horrendous lag, agility allows you to make it into cover and survive the occasional bullet that goes through the wall. Some maps have obstacles that Hunters can jump onto without using their ability jump. It's also worth noting that fleet-footed adds 1 agility stat, but we'll get to all that later. Both recovery and agility make more of a difference at a higher stat value. I'll give you an example. 7 recovery is much more noticeable than 6 recovery. 2 recovery isn't that much more noticeable than 1 recovery. That being said, the Hunter has a high base agility stat, so it's smart to take advantage of this very high agility, since like I just said, it's kind of an exponential gain. Next, we're going to get into gear stats. Intellect determines how quickly your super ability generates. With tier 5 intellect, your super charges in 4 minutes. With the Tarantella exotic, the charge rate is 3 minutes and 27 seconds, roughly 30 seconds faster. With the Scories artifact, Blade can recharge in as little as 2 minutes. With the Tarantella and Scories, the charge rate is as little as 1 minute and 45 seconds. That's insane. Discipline determines how quickly your grenade ability recharges. With tier 5 discipline, your grenade recharges in 25.8 seconds. 22.4 seconds if you're wearing the Tarantella. The second grenade, if for instance you were using the Fellwinter's artifact or some exotic that gives you 2 grenades, the second grenade takes 50 seconds to recharge. This is regardless of if you're at tier 5 discipline. The Frosties, another exotic boot, cut the cooldown roughly in half, so that goes from 25.8 to roughly 13 seconds. Finally, strength determines how quickly your melee ability recharges. With tier 5, your melee recharge is 25 seconds. Now there is a perk on the Bladedancer skill tree that we'll get more into later. It's called Fast Twitch. What this perk does is it recharges your melee very, very rapidly. So instead of 20 seconds with tier 5, you could get as little as 7 seconds with tier 0. And Frosties cut that cooldown roughly in half. So with tier 5 melee and Frosties, you could have a 13-second melee. Just like Discipline if you were using 2 grenades, Strength works the same way with 2 melees if you were using, say, the Fellwinter's artifact or the sealed Ahamkara grasps. The recharge rate for the second melee is 50 seconds. Next up on the chopping block, we'll be talking about the Bladedancer skill tree, and we'll start with jumping abilities. Higher jump is exactly what it sounds like. It's a second higher jump, and it offers access to very few out-of-map spots. Basically, nobody uses this in PvP. Control jump, on the other hand, is a second control jump which allows for lateral movements, i.e. side to side, forward to back to forward, side to side. Now Blink is a unique one to the Bladedancer and the Voidwalker. It's a short-range teleport that offers instant horizontal movement and the occasional invincibility at the cost of radar, HUD, and recovery, though Bungie just said that they're restoring the recovery on it, meaning you're not going to lose recovery for using this jump anymore, and they're reducing the time that the HUD goes away, so this will still be very relevant after this update. Now it's worth mentioning at this point in the video, we're going to talk about an exotic boot called the Bones of EAO. Basically, with control jump, they can be used for very fast movement because the jump speed from one control jump transfers to the next, and if you use it on low ceilings, it can slingshot the hunter. Bones of EAO offer a lot of access to out-of-map spots and very, very quick lateral movement. So you can go side to side to side, front to front, back to front, and so forth. Now that you got a handle on jumping, we're going to talk about grenades. The Flux Grenade is a sticky grenade that does 219 damage when stuck, and 140 when they step within that grenade's radius. The Skip Grenade is a tracking grenade that deals upwards of 135 damage. The initial projectile bounces and breaks into multiple tracking projectiles, which can be especially annoying with the enhanced tracking from Shinobu's Vow exotic gauntlets.
Available.
The Arc Bolt Grenade is a seeking grenade that on impact searches, then deals 91 damage in a bolt. This bolt can tag 3 guardians at once. It's worth mentioning that the No Land Beyond body shot can kill with an Arc Bolt tag. The melee ability is a melee attack with extended range. Backstab does 364 damage when attacking from behind. This is especially useful for one-hit killing people and getting rid of supers. When using Escape Artist, hitting an enemy grants 7 seconds of invisibility. Fast Twitch, like we said earlier, significantly reduces melee cooldown. It's a 7-second cooldown with tier 0, 6.25 second cooldown with tier 1, 5.75 second cooldown with tier 2, and once you go to tier 5, it is 3.1 seconds. I skipped tier 3 and tier 4 because it's not used as much as tier 1 and tier 2. The super ability of the Bladedancer is Arc Blade. This is where the Bladedancer uses a melee-based third-person super where your guardian gets roughly 200% damage resistance and an arc blade that lunges at enemies. There are 3 perks for this super. The first is Showstopper. You can use the right trigger to do a ballerina twirl that damages enemies in a small radius. You can use Razor's Edge, which is where your right trigger unleashes a wave that travels along the ground. Now, it does not work on all textures, but it does work on most slopes. You can also use Vanish, which is where you use your right trigger to go invisible for 7 seconds, and it automatically makes your guardian invisible when activating the super. Next, we're talking about passive abilities. Fleet-footed increases sprint speed, adds agility, and the knee pads perk, which lets you slide farther. Quickdraw is a perk that readies your weapons faster, but not immediately. This perk stacks with Snapshot for a better than Quickdraw aim down sight speed. What you're seeing in the background now is on the bottom right, I'm using the Quickdraw skill with weapons that do not have Quickdraw enabled. On the bottom left, I'm using weapons that have the Quickdraw perk without the Quickdraw skill enabled. And in the top left, I'm using neither Quickdraw the perk or Quickdraw the skill. Stalker is a unique perk that when you crouch for a few seconds, it'll trigger invisibility that lasts for 7 seconds. Shadowjack is a perk that extends your invisibility. So Escape Artist, the melee, goes from 7 to 12 seconds. Stalker, the perk, goes from 7 to 10 seconds, and Vanish, the Arc Blade ability, goes from 7 to 12 seconds. Encore is a perk that when killing an enemy with Arc Blade extends the duration and increases damage for a short time. It's not really worth using in PvP unless people are being jerks with infinity bubbles. Hungering Blade is a melee ability that when you get melee kills, ability kills, keep in mind this is not any melee kill, you have to have the ability up, and Arc Blade kills heal a portion of your health. It does not start shield regeneration. On that note, we're going to talk more about invisibility. When going invisible, by any method, you ping on the radar the instant you turn invisible. When in the center radius of your radar, you will show up regardless of whether you're invisible or not. When sprinting, you ping on the radar for a second, but disappear again if you don't stop moving. While control jump and high jump will not break your invis, you will show up on the radar. And any kind of jumping, even with an ability, or even without an ability, it will ping the radar. Those are just the basics of invisibility. When you get into the advanced techniques of it, you just want to avoid teammates. They'll show up on your radar and ruin your element of surprise. And if you jump or sprint to ping the radar, then flank from an alternate angle. They'll see the radar light up on one side and then you end up on the opposite side. It's very effective. And finally, if you use a lot of invis, just the sheer sound of invisibility triggering is enough to panic a team. You can see it from across the map. If you go invisible and they hear it from across the map, they'll just start spinning circles because they're anticipating you to show up in their face with a shotgun. It's pretty funny. Next up is movement, and here are some of the basics. While the hunter is faster on foot than a warlock or titan, it's slower when ability jumps are used. The titan can skate and the warlock can bounce. Now if you have Bones of AO with a control jump, then maybe you'll be faster than the warlocks, and maybe the titans if you're close quarters indoors. Now the control jump is the only jump that can instantly change momentum, which is extremely useful for close quarter maneuvers. Now although I don't recommend blink for basic movement, it is useful and I'll get to that later. Now another thing worth mentioning is that if you slide and jump around corners, you will not appear at head level, and therefore it'll be a little bit harder for you to get sniped by somebody. Finally, since you're a hunter, you have slightly faster strafe speed, so use it to your advantage whenever you're dueling if cover is not available. Cover is available, you can pop in and out faster than other people, so you can use a gun like, say, Meta Multi-Tool and take advantage of being able to pop out, shoot, go back into cover, pop out, shoot, go back into cover, and maintain full rate of fire. On to the advanced techniques. Now I just told you that blink can be good. I know. Trust me here for a second. Blink is the only jump with purely instant horizontal movement. If you pull out a sword hilt shortly before jumping, by the time blink activates you'll be in third person, you can still swap to and fire a weapon before the blink cooldown subsides. You can utilize this to get through lanes if you suspect someone's looking at it, while being able to see them at the peak of your jump. Blink bouncing is kind of a glitch, and it works on very few surfaces. This offers almost no advantage, but I bet someone will figure out how to consistently do this off teammates or just some map objects that makes it more consistent. So when swiping with the arc blade, you can use forward momentum to blink forward or double jump forward. So this also brings up the Bones of AO, with double control jump pairing nicely with arc blade and a super to catch up to skating titans. Jump, swipe, ability jump, and swipe. Here are a few things I learned while using this class after the most recent Bladedancer nerf. I call this universal strategy. So use the Arc Blade super as a disrupting super rather than a killing super. And you let teammates pick off distracted enemies. You don't go in for the kill. The rule of thumb is as follows. If you feel the need to get up close, does the enemy have a super? If not, can you kill that person with a grenade? If you can't, can you kill that person with Razor's Edge? If not, can you go invisible and find a new angle before that super expires? And if not, then by all means, get in there and swipe. Invisibility can make up for poor recovery. Run from fights that you're destined to lose. Activate invisibility and re-engage them with an upper hand. Finally, skips and arc bolts can be used to prime or finish a target, while flux grenades can be used as an alternative to shooting or as a last resort to trade. The last thing we're going to talk about before we get into builds is gear. For a Bladedancer helmet, you should look for Ashes to Asset or whatever gives you additional super energy for grenade kills. You also want the perk that recovers a shield on orb pickup to compensate for low recovery. And then some year 1 helmets offer an assortment of useful perks in this slot. I have an Iron Banner one with throw distance, but you can get the Crota or Vaulted Glass one with the perk that gives you melee energy for a grenade kill or grenade energy for a melee kill or hit. For gloves, I prefer fastball, which is grenade throw distance. If you're using skip grenades or suicide bombing or fluxes, then you can get away with melee speed, but I tend to like fastball because the grenades travel slightly faster and farther. As for reloading, I default to hand cannon because I use hand cannons most, but feel free to use whatever primary that you enjoy using. For a body, I like increased ammo for whatever weapon with improved arc armor. As for the boots, same thing, increased ammo for whatever weapon of choice with arc double down or second wind. Now, this is pretty cool. Skips can activate arc double down when they destroy themselves. The artifact I use generally depends on the build, however, I usually just default to Memory of Yolder or Memory of Perun. The first build we're going over makes use of the Tarantella, which if you remember from earlier in this guide, it drops the super down from 4 minutes of passive super to 3 minutes and 30 seconds just idly waiting for your super. Now what this usually means for a game type like say Trials of Osiris is that you will have the first super, as long as you get kills and are generally useful to your team. Now couple this with the fact that most people will not have shotgun or special ammo because you now lose it every round of trials. So Bladedancer is actually pretty strong if there's no other super and no special weapons to contest it. This build takes everything strong about the Bladedancer and puts it all together. You have a Quickdraw primary, a Quickdraw secondary that regenerates ammo, Icebreaker. You have a sword hilt to see third person, you have invisibility, and then you have a super that, as long as you're doing what you're supposed to, will be uncontested. And even with the Hungering Blade buff, where they're going to give a little bit more health per kill, you don't need Hungering Blade if you are the only super on the field. In a passive game mode like Trials, you can get away with running Backstab, and then in between rounds, switch from Backstab to Fast Twitch. And it's like you don't even have Tier 0, Tier 1, or Tier 2 strength if you're lucky. Now the argument for skip grenades can definitely be made on this build. But me in particular, I seem to have a knack for running into Night Stalkers, and skip grenades are pretty useless against Night Stalkers, so I just opt for flux grenades. If you're the kind of person who doesn't like the sniper hand cannon life, you can try to find a pulse rifle with Quickdraw. Yes, they exist. The Waltz from Future War Cult, the Clever Dragon, and the Aegis of the Reef. Since I just listed legendary weapons, you can actually pair this with the Chaperone or a sidearm. I recommend the Trespasser or the Wormwood. However, let's get back to that Chaperone for a second. The Chaperone can actually run single point sling, which pairs nicely. Now it's not the same draw speed as Quickdraw, but it's damn better than a lot of other shotguns. And since you're running fleet-footed, you give knee pads to the chaperone, which already has one of the furthest kill distance with a shotgun. And if chaperone's too easy for you, you can opt for Lord of Wolves. Just make sure you hit your shots and you will kill from some crazy distances. But since we already established that this is the ideal loadout for trials, it might be better to just run a sidearm so you always have special weapon ammo and save your flux to deal with revives. This one is going to be very apparent from the get-go. One Guardian is aiming down sights, the other is aiming from the hip. Now watch the difference in strafe speed. To do this test, I used 2 Xboxes and 2 controllers and slammed the left stick at the exact same time so there can't be any possible lag or coordination issues. You probably noticed in the title card I used the word Fizzor, and that was an important name back in the day of Destiny. Fizzor was a pretty damn good player who, in a time of thorns and last words, decided to run Meta Multi-Tool and Radiant Dance Machines. The speed at which you can move with this build is terrifying, so he was definitely onto something. In today's meta, there is just not as much special ammo, so you're pretty much having to resort to primary fights, and that's where this build is. They can't hit what they can't keep up with, and if you're faster than them on the strafe, you add a teabag strafe in there, and you can aim while doing it, you'll be untouched. This build is very similar to the previous build, except you're switching the Tarantella for the Radiant Dance Machines. And you can also opt to go skip or even Arc Bolt Grenade. All 3 are great choices. Scout Rifle Reloaders, Arc Armor, don't forget it, and you can use any special weapon you want. Anything goes good with the Meta Multi-Tool. But if you're going to snipe, make sure it's a high impact snipe, because there's one very sneaky trick of the trade. You body shot them once with Meta Multi-Tool, and they think, hey, I'm not really hurt. Then you switch to a sniper rifle and shoot them right in the body, because they're going to be an idiot and peek. For the perk options on the multi-tool, I opt for agility, because on my skill tree, I max out agility. Remember what I said earlier in the video. You get exponential gains the higher a stat is, with the exception of armor. I'm just talking recovery agility. Now the argument can be made to run armor. With this build, you can die to a trip mine, and it sucks, but on the other hand, you can still survive a first curse 2-tap, as well as a couple other quality of life primaries. So the question you gotta ask yourself when you choose high armor versus max agility is the person I'm playing using trip mines. The strength of this build is very obvious. You can strafe monstrously fast. People don't even know what hit them sometimes. Sometimes people don't land a shot on me. Sometimes I get in a 2v1 and outshoot both of them with this build. You gotta remember, in year 1, invisibility was not a necessity like it feels now. So what I like to do is go invisible and get first shot. And after I get first shot, I am pretty much in the clear to just strafe, aim at my target, and win my gunfight. Arc bolts should not be underestimated in this build. Remember, they tag 91 to the body, so that means you only need 2 meta headshots to kill someone after they're tagged. And arc bolts can tag multiple people. So if you get a 2-person tag or a 3-person tag, it only takes 2 cleanup shots per person. So I can't really give a detailed guide to strafing because it's kind of unique like a thumbprint. You might do left to right, you might do one direction. It depends on what kind of player you're playing to decide this. Sometimes I like to throw in a teabag or 2 in between my strafe because they might be aiming for my head and I duck out of their bullets. Now, the obvious thing to do when strafing is to strafe towards cover, and some great players expect this. But the even greater players play a mind game where they pretend to go towards cover, and then double back in the opposite direction, adding in a teabag strafe or something fancy like a jump. But an even greater player might see through this and assume that you're going to go towards cover just because you're trying to throw them off. It's a mind game, so like I said, strafing is not a one-shoe-fits-all solution. You have to adjust it to who you're playing, and a lot of the time, hitting your shots is much more important than strafing. Another thing that's changed since year 1 is the addition to another weapon that has enhanced strafe speed. That weapon I'm talking about is the first curse, and you have to get a headshot to proc this particular perk. And you might be saying, well, that's kind of strange to use extra strafe speed with a hand cannon, but it seems to work. So here's my take on the first curse. It's not an ideal archetype of hand cannon. It doesn't kill faster than an IS Luna for 1 headshot and 2 bodies, and it certainly doesn't kill faster than a Revelator archetype of 2 headshot 1 body. But what it can do is when you peek, it can do more damage per headshot, which does add up to a sizable difference when you take into account grenades and teammates. With the added strafe speed from the dance machines and the added strafe speed from the first curse perk, you can stack these to peek in and out of cover quickly, shooting them when they have no opportunity to shoot you back, taking full advantage of the archetype. The way I decide to go first curse or multi-tool is, do I like jumping in the air against this particular player, and are my teammates fantastic? If the answer is yes, go first curse. Definitely keep this build in mind for the one day when auto rifles are buffed, because what you can do is throw on single point sling and be a strafe monster. When I show you this build, you're going to be like, wait, Cammy, there was options to use other things? Yeah, this is probably the most common Bladedancer loadout, and you've already seen most of it. No Land Beyond, Shinobu's Vow, and a sidearm. With the special ammo nerf, there's less shotguns, less fusion rifles, and less snipers. So sidearms reign supreme because they have ammo and most other weapons don't. Pair this with No Land Beyond, the primary sniper rifle, and skip grenades to clean up body shots, and you're looking at a very solid build. The difference between this build and the previous builds I showed you is that this one actually uses the Quickdraw skill. Since No Land Beyond has the snapshot perk, it does stack with the Quickdraw skill. So you get a pretty snappy sniper rifle that doesn't flinch that much. But Bungie is updating No Land Beyond to experience flinch. This loadout isn't going to go away, but it might be a little less popular, but it certainly won't be ineffective. This will still be a very strong loadout. Because you run Quickdraw the skill, you don't have to run Quickdraw on your sidearm. So you can opt for reinforced barrel or high caliber rounds like I did to get a little bit more range out of your sidearm. If I had to guess, this would be the most common Trials of Osiris loadout for Bladedancers. This is the last build I'm going to show you in this video. I could show you lots of other builds, but I might scare the children. Anyway, there are other Bladedancer exotics worth mentioning, and I'll go through them really briefly so you can get an idea of what builds nicely with them. I don't really feel like putting any more gameplay in the background because I feel like you've seen enough, so I put up this Bell Bunny Deej slicing of Vex Open with the Samurai Sword while I talk about Bladedancer exotics. Khepri's Sting are gauntlets that give you the Stalker perk, so you can opt to run Hungering Blade and have Stalker in your gauntlets inherent. When invisible, your melee does backstab damage from behind. Now it does not stack with backstab, but it certainly works with Escape Artist and Fast Twitch. The melee also deals poison damage regardless of if you're behind them. So you can get away with some melee and then a hand cannon shot and get the hell out of there, and it'll still kill them. The other pair of exotic gauntlets are the Sealed Ahimkara Grasp. These give you 2 melee abilities, and reloads your primary weapon on a melee kill occasionally. This works pretty well with Universal Remote since it has 3 bullets in the magazine, and you might get lucky and reload all 3 bullets into there while having crowd control active to go on a tear. The Bones of EAO I've already talked about ad nauseum, but essentially you get 2 control jumps and now you can be as evasive as you've ever dreamed. You're probably wondering why I haven't mentioned Frosties in one of the builds, because Frosties are pretty good, especially if you run the Fellwinter's artifact to completely get rid of the inconsistent Blade Super and instead run 2 Fluxes or 2 Skips and 2 Backstabs. If I was only to use one Blade exotic, it would be these, but I like variety. And frankly, whenever you sprint with them, it increases your look sensitivity, and that just throws me off, especially when I use them briefly. But if I was stuck with one exotic and I only use them, that would be the greatest bang for your buck. Now there are other exotics for the Bladedancer, but the ones I mentioned do a little bit more than the others, so I'm going to save you 15 minutes of talking and end the video here. If you find yourself liking the kinds of videos I make, feel free to subscribe, and please don't forget to hit the notification icon because YouTube likes to forget to notify people, sorry I got loud, about my videos. The Quickdraw perk, weapons your readies faster. Weapons your readies faster? Jesus f***ing Christ, Cammy. Get it together.